So today we will study the model of the larynx. So larynx is made up of this. This is also called the voice box, and it is fitted on the upper end of the trachea or the windpipe. So it is both the organ of the respiration as well as the phonation or the sound form. Now it is made up of the various paired and the unpaired cartilages. The unpaired cartilage is the largest, is the thyroid cartilage. So this thyroid cartilage is called thyroid because it is shield-like. The word thyroid means shield-like structure. So it has got the upper border or superior border, and then it has got the inferior border. Then it has got the lateral border, and the upper end of the lateral border is called the superior cornu or the cornu, and lower is called the inferior corner or the cornu, which fitted with the cricoid cartilage to form the joint. Now this large part of the thyroid cartilage is called the lamina, which bears an oblique line on it, on which the various infrahyoid muscles they are attached. Now in the center, where the two laminas they meet together and they form an angle. In the male, this angle is less than 90 degrees, so it gives the laryngeal prominence, which is called the Adam's apple. But in the female, the two laminas of the thyroid cartilage, they are more than 90 degrees, so it is almost flat and insignificant and not visible in the anterior triangle of our neck. So this is, and the thyroid cartilage is deficient posteriorly. So it is only anterior and lateral in position. Now below comes the ring shape that is called the cricoid cartilage, which is also unpaired. And this cricoid cartilage is a ring shape, and anteriorly it is having a narrow part, and posteriorly it bears the lamina, which is large posteriorly. So this constitutes the large posterior part of the lamina. This white one is the lamina of the cricoid cartilage, which is more posteriorly, but anterior it is narrow. So this is called the lamina of the cricoid cartilage. Then another unpaired cartilage is the epiglottis. So this is the epiglottis, and this epiglottis is leaf-like, and it is broad above, and as we go downward, this epiglottis becomes the narrow part. The narrow lower part is called the petiole, and this petiole is attached to the posterior surface of the lower part of the cricoid lamina near the angle of the thyroid cartilage. Now this epiglottis has got two surfaces, anterior and the posterior surface. Anterior surface is rough and posterior surface is smooth. Anterior surface is rough because of the attachment of the various folds or the ligaments. In the upper part is the glossoepiglottic fold, then the hyoepiglottic fold, and then below is the epiglottic fold. That's why the anterior surface is rough, because of the attachment of these folds. But posteriorly it is smooth because it is covered by the respiratory mucosa, that is the ciliated columnar epithelium, except in the upper part where this is the non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. So superior border and the posterior upper surface is having the non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, that is the epithelium of the friction. It is because whenever the bolus of the food passes into the pharynx, it touches the upper part of the epiglottis. So there is no reflex, cuff reflex, because there is no ciliated columnar epithelium. The non-ciliated part is present here to prevent the cuff reflex. Then in the middle part of the posterior surface of the epiglottis, there lies some pits. These pits on the posterior surface contains the mucous glands, and these mucous glands they secrete the mucosa, which lubricates the larynx as well as the epiglottis, and which is another defense mechanism to prevent any pollen grains on any spores of the bacteria to get entry into our respiratory tract. So this defense mechanism is on this part of the epiglottis, on the posterior surface. The mucosal pits are present in the center part here, which because of this. Now, so they are the unpaired three cartilages. Then the paired, there are the cartilages which is called the arytenoid, corniculate and equiniform. So arytenoid cartilages, they are triangular in shape. The base is below, broad, and apex is pointed and medially directed. It has got the posterior surface which is in line with the posterior surface of the lamina of the cricoid cartilage. If we see anterior surface of the arytenoid cartilage, it bears a process which is called the vocal process. This vocal process lies on the anterior surface of the middle of the cricoid, this arytenoid cartilage. As the name suggests, the vocal process, to this attach the vocal cord, which is the medial border of the cricovocal membrane. Then above the apex of then laterally, the arytenoid cartilages bears a process which is called the muscular process. So various muscles, specifically the safety muscle of the larynx, that is the posterior cricoarytenoid muscle, is inserted over here. The lateral cricoarytenoid muscle is also attached to the vocal, that is the muscular process, which is present on the lateral border of the lateral end of the base of the arytenoid cartilage. The base of the arytenoid cartilage is convex and it fitted on the superior concave surface of the lamina of the cricoid cartilage to form a joint, and this joint, that is between the cricoarytenoid joint, is a synovial variety of the joint, and it gives the rotational movement which bring about the adduction and abduction of the vocal cords attached to the vocal process of the cricoid cartilage, this arytenoid cartilage. So cuneiform, so they are comma shaped, they are smaller ones, they are paired ones, and they are attached on the apex of the arytenoid cartilages here. So this is how we do the paired and the unpaired cartilages. So these paired and unpaired cartilages, they are joined together to form a voice box or the larynx with the help of the various ligaments, folds, and the various membranes that we will do one by one. Before we going into the detail of the folds and the ligaments and the membranes, now this larynx is inferiorly related and attached to the thyroid cartilage, or this windpipe or the trachea, and superiorly it is related to the hide bone. And the gap between the lower border of the hide bone and the superior border of the thyroid cartilage is closed by a membrane which is called the thyroid membrane. And remember, this thyroid membrane is pierced by three structures: one artery, one vein, and one nerve. So nerve is called the internal laryngeal nerve. The artery is called the superior laryngeal artery and accompanying superior laryngeal vein. So all of them, they pierce the thyroid membrane and they go enter into this. So this internal laryngeal nerve is the branch of the superior laryngeal nerve, and superior laryngeal nerve is the branch of the vagus nerve. So superior laryngeal nerve in the anterior triangle, in the carotid sheath, it gives the superior laryngeal nerve, which divides into internal laryngeal nerve, which goes inside the larynx, hence its name, after piercing thyroid membrane. And we see here that this internal laryngeal nerve is descending downward and goes inside the larynx, accompanied by the superior laryngeal artery, which is the branch of the superior thyroid artery. So this is how we see the internal laryngeal nerve entering into the larynx through the piercing, after piercing thyroid membrane. The external laryngeal remains outside, and it runs outside because the cricothyroid muscle is waiting for it. So this is the external laryngeal nerve which remains outside the larynx, while the internal laryngeal will pierce the thyroid membrane and goes inside. That's why their name. So this is how we do the thyroid membrane. First membrane, that is the thyroid membrane. The another membrane are the small, which is attached to the inferior border of the thyroid cartilage and the upper border of the cricoid cartilage. So it is called the cricothyroid membrane and fills the gap between the two. The anterior median part of this cricothyroid membrane is thickened and it is called the conus elasticus. This conus elasticus posteriorly is very much attached to the vocal cords. Then the gap between the lower border of the cricoid cartilage and the upper border of the trachea is also closed by a membrane which is called the cricotracheal membrane. So no air leakage is there anteriorly by the cricothyroid membrane, cricothyroid membrane, cricothyroid membrane, and the cricotracheal membrane. So safe entry of the air and leakage of air has been the air-proof, leakage-proof passages provided by these membranes. Then another membranes we discuss about the larynx inside is that we have to do the posterior aspect. Posteriorly, when we see here, a very large membrane is there which is called the quadrangular membrane because it has got 4 angles. The quadrangular membrane is called the epiglottic membrane. Epiglottic membrane. Because this membrane, it is an almost vertical membrane, and its attachment is number 1, lateral border of the epiglottis. Then this is its upper free border of the quadrangular membrane, which stretches from the apex of the arytenoid cartilage to the uppermost part of the lateral border of the epiglottis. So this upper border is called the upper fold of the quadrangular membrane, or what is called the crico, and that is called the epiglottic membrane. And this upper border also has got the non-keratinoid stratified squamous epithelium, again the mucosa of diffraction, because there are also chances of the touching of the food bolus to this upper part, as well as here there is a non-ciliated columnar epithelium is absent. Instead, it is replaced by the non-keratinoid stratified squamous epithelium. So in the larynx there are 3 regions which do not have got the ciliated or the sensitive mucosa. Number 1 is the superior border of the epiglottis, number 2 is the upper border of the quadrangular membrane, and third is the vocal cords, which contains or which is covered by non-keratinoid stratified squamous epithelium. So this is how with the quadrangular. So inferiorly, this quadrangular membrane, which is internally, it is lined by the respiratory mucosa. Same respiratory mucosa is continuous with the respiratory mucosa over the posterior surface of the epiglottis. So this is continuous. And the same mucous membrane, it goes down into the trachea and into the primary, secondary, and the tertiary bronchiole as the ciliated columnar epithelium. So this respiratory mucosa is continuous from the larynx into the trachea as well as the bronchial tree. So this is how the position is there. Now, inferiorly, this quadrangular membrane has got a free border, and this lower free border of the quadrangular membrane, which stretches from the thyroid cartilage inner surface up to the arytenoid cartilage, is called the vestibular fold or respiratory fold. So respiratory fold is also covered by the same, that is the ciliated columnar epithelium. So this is the vestibular fold stretching from the inner surface of the thyroid epiglottis and thyroid cartilage, and it is going posteriorly towards the arytenoid cartilage. So these vestibular folds, they remain away from each other. They are already abducted because these are called respiratory folds, because inspiration, the expiration occurs through this. So they have to be separated. They are widely separated by the 2 quadrangular. So they are the lower free border of the quadrangular membrane is called the vestibular fold, while the upper free border from the epiglottic fold of the larynx, and it also constitutes what is called the laryngeal inlet. So this epiglottis is called the lid of the larynx because this is the laryngeal inlet. So this pear-shaped area is called the laryngeal inlet. Now my hand is going into the laryngeal inlet. So laryngeal inlet, the boundary is superiorly is bounded by the upper free border of the epiglottis. This is the upper free border of the epiglottis, and then laterally it is formed by the lateral border of the epiglottis and aryepiglottic fold, and inferiorly here in between the apices of the arytenoid cartilages, again here come the mucous membrane of the larynx. So in this way, this pear-shaped area which is so formed is called the laryngeal inlet. And it is a very sensitive because in the lower part it is covered by the internally covered by the ciliated mucosa. So whenever any food particle or any pollen grains or the spores of the bacteria try to enter through this laryngeal inlet into the larynx, so the cilia present here, they are sensitized and this whole of the epiglottis is closed like this. So this is the mechanism that how the epiglottis is closing. So epiglottis and aryepiglottic or quadrangular membrane helps in the closure of the laryngeal inlet. That's why it is called the lid of the larynx. And this is how the protective phenomena is formed by this epiglottis and the quadrangular membrane which is stretching here. Now this quadrangular membrane also inside it contains the muscle having the same name. Aryepiglotticus muscle is embedded in this quadrangular membrane. So the contraction of these muscle of the aryepiglotticus muscle of the quadrangular membrane make the laryngeal inlet close during any entry of the foreign body try to enter into the larynx. So this protective phenomena has been shown here by the model at how this works. And another membrane is a very almost horizontal membrane is called the cricovocal membrane. So this cricovocal membrane, as the name suggests, is related to the cricoid cartilage and the vocal cords. So this is a hammock-shaped membrane. So at the periphery, it is attached to the cricoid cartilage, that the ring shape anterior part and lateral part of the cricoid cartilage, as well as the inside of the lamina. Lower border of the lamina is the attachment of the cricovocal membrane. So this is the cricovocal membrane attached to this. Now in the middle part, so it is a hammock-shaped cricovocal membrane, and because the level of the cricoid cartilage is above and anteriorly is attached to the conus elasticus. So this cricovocal membrane goes upward from the cricoid cartilage in the upward direction. So it is a hammock-like structure. In the midline, this cricovocal membrane is slit, having a gap, and this gap between the two is the form the what is called the. So the medial free border of the cricovocal membrane constitutes the vocal cords. So it is how simplify you can understand that if there is a cricoid cartilage, a ring-shaped structure, you put a sellotape here. Now this sellotape on the cricoid cartilage is called the cricovocal membrane. And you fit the cricoid cartilage along the cricovocal membrane inside the larynx. Now what will happen? No air can go in and out of the larynx. So we have to cut it. We have to slit in the midline this cricovocal membrane so that air can pass through the lungs and the nasal cavity or the exterior. So this splitting of the cricovocal membrane in the midline, so what will form? Two folds will be created, right and left. So these medial free borders, these are called the medial free borders of the cricovocal membrane, which are popularly known as the vocal cords. So this is how easily you can understand what is the vocal cord. So the vocal cords, they are attached superiorly to the vocal process of the cricoid cartilage. And as the vocal process, they are lying superiorly above the cricoid cartilage. Naturally, this cricovocal membrane will ascend upward and attached to the apex of the vocal process of the arytenoid cartilage. Then its anterior part will go downward because it has to attach to the conus elasticus. That's why it becomes like this, or what is called the hammock-like. So this is the hammock-like structure, that is the cricovocal membrane. This is how it is sent, attached here to the cricoid cartilage, upper border, and it goes upward, attached to the vocal process and the conus elasticus. So from the conus elasticus to the vocal process, so this medial free border of the cricovocal membrane constitute what is called the vocal cord. Now this vocal cord is also lined by the ciliated columnar epithelium, that is the laryngeal mucosa. Now what happens, that above there is a vestibular fold, which is the lower border of the quadrangular membrane, and below this is the vocal fold. So this vocal cord actually they constitute the vocal fold, and above is the vestibular fold. So there is a gap between the vestibular fold and the vocal fold. Now the vestibular folds, they are abducted, while the vocal cords, they are very near. So when we do the laryngoscopy, there are direct and indirect laryngoscopy. So we put a laryngoscope from the upper part and we see inside story. So here also I have tried to show in the model that if you see from the superior side, so you see laterally placed are the vestibular folds, and vocal fold or the vocal cord is medially placed. So same thing is visible during the laryngoscopic direct or indirect surgery. Now another thing is happening here, that the area is created between the lateral surface of the quadrangular membrane and the inner surface of the lamina of the thyroid cartilage. So this gap between the laterally the thyroid cartilage and medially the quadrangular membrane, this area is called the piriform or the silent area of the larynx. So this is called the silent area because here the tumor when grows here, the cancer when grow in this area, there is a very large area because it is pear shaped. That's why it is called the piriform area. Because above it is broad. So now my hand is in the piriform area. So my hand is accommodated because it is very large superiorly, and as we go down it becomes narrow. That's why it is called the pear shape. So it is called the piriform area or the silent area. It is called the silent area because the cancer growth here when occurs takes slowly, it grows very rapidly, and when it becomes fourth stage, only then patient come with the growth, because this growth is start growing medially, and when it pushes the quadrangular membrane to the opposite side and touches the opposite side of the quadrangular membrane, then only patient come, because this gives the symptom of dyspnea. Because now the right and left quadrangular membrane, they are meeting in the midline almost. So then the patient will come, but now at that position, tumor is already fourth stage because it has occupied whole of the large piriform area and now it is directing medially. That's why it is called the silent area, that the piriform area. Now this piriform area has got another thing which is called the saccule of the laryngeal mucosa. Now there is a gap between the vestibular fold above and the vocal fold below. Through this gap, this respiratory mucosa, which is lining the inner side of the quadrangular membrane or whole of the larynx, between these upper vestibular fold and lower vocal fold, now this mucosa will go between the folds, and this mucosa will go upward in the piriform area. So this fold of then this goes upward and then take U-turn and then they again come downward. The mucous membrane from this gap between the vocal fold and the vestibular fold, which is called the rima glottis. So this fold goes upward in the piriform area of mucous membrane, then it again turns downward, and then again comes between the two folds. And now this lower part of the mucous membrane, which is coming down from this, it forms a sinus. So they call the sinus or the saccule. This is the saccule, this sac-like structure of the mucous membrane in the piriform area form the saccule. And this opening between the vestibular fold and vocal fold is called the sinus. Now this length of this and breadth of this saccule is related to the pitch of the sound. In the howler monkey, when he shouts, we can hear the shout of the howler monkey from 3 miles because this saccule is very large. So length of the saccule gives the pitch of the sound, the loud and the slow. Then this mucous membrane again comes downward. Then it covers the superior surface of the cricovocal membrane. And the superior surface of the cricovocal membrane, this mucous membrane is very loosely attached or wrinkled. Then it comes again through the same gap inside the larynx. Now it covers the vocal cords where it is very tightly adherent. And here also cilia disappears, and here is also the vocal folds, they are covered by the non-keratinoid stratified squamous epithelium. Then this mucosa then covers the undersurface of the cricovocal membrane, and then it gravitates down and continues with the ciliated columnar epithelium, that is the respiratory mucosa of the inner side of the trachea and the bronchial tree of the lungs. So this is how the ciliated columnar epithelium of the larynx is continuous with the bronchopulmonary segments and the trachea and the bronchial tree. So I have shown this how the mucous membrane is having this. So in the next part we will do the muscles of the larynx. Thank you.